All right, so what's up? It's Todd Atkins. I'm going to be going live here in just a moment with Laurynn Garcia. He's an amateur fighter. She was due to have a fight here in about a month, but it got pushed back a little bit, so we're going to talk about that today. What's up, Angel? So should be bringing her on here in any moment now. How you doing, Angel? And for people watching this, if you enjoy this kind of content, just feel free to follow me. If you have any questions today, if they're any good, I'll read them and so forth. Hey, Laurynn, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for taking time to do this. And, for anybody who's watching this who may not be familiar with you, if you kind of wanted to introduce yourself a little bit.
Okay, so my name is Laurynn Garcia. I am the Iron Butterfly. I fight out of Oceanside, California. I am currently 3-0, about to go 4-0 here June 25th for my next fight with Valkyrie FC1. So that's me.
Now, you decided to start out amateur. Kind of what went into that decision? Because some people do turn pro right off the bat. Why did you decide not to?
For me, it was just I wanted to get the feel of what it was going to be like. I mean, I started training when I was 15 with like jiu-jitsu and MMA and all that. I obviously couldn't compete yet until I was about 18. So I just kind of wanted to test the waters a little bit and kind of see where I'm at. I probably won't stay amateur too much longer after this. I'm hoping by next year to go pro. But right now I'm just kind of getting the feel of it. Also because I had one fight back in 2017, which I had first for my first MMA fight. And then right after that, or a year later, I had gotten pregnant. So I had to take this long hiatus of becoming a mom and getting adjusted to that lifestyle. And then once I was ready, I had been about almost 3 years since I had even fought. So I just kind of wanted to work my way back into it and then, move on from there.
When you made the decision, was it more your decision, or were your coaches kind of involved in deciding whether you go amateur or start pro?
I mean, it was kind of my own decision. But even my coaches kind of encouraged me to start with amateur. Because you just don't know what you're going to get yourself into. And the rules are not so different, but there are different rules set for amateur versus pro. So, yeah, they wanted me to start off with that and then work my way from there.
Yeah, I always like to ask because I like to kind of see maybe where the person's coming from. Because, like I said, some people do go pro, and there's a reason why they decide to. Some people start amateur. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of trying to maybe get an idea of what your thought process was on it. Because I know, you can't get paid, basically, when you're doing amateur. So some people don't want to subject themselves to that, but you felt that was the best course for you.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with going straight to pro. I do feel like if you don't really know or have a lot of training and you decide to go pro just because the money's there, then yeah, I think that's kind of where you've messed up a little bit because you're going in there with no fight experience whatsoever, no shin guards, elbows at that point are allowed. So you get all this criteria and you just kind of don't know what to do with it. So I think that's where amateur is great, is just to like kind of test it out and see if you actually really like it. Because you never know, you might not like it. And it would be, horrible to go pro and you lose one fight and you're like, oh, well, this isn't for me,
Now, the 3 fights you have, maybe looking at them as a whole, looking back on them, what has been your thoughts so far on kind of like the 3 fights that you had thus far?
All 3 have really allowed me to test every ability I have with my martial arts. So there's a couple fights, at least 2 of them I've had where I've allowed to test my striking more, and then 1 more so my grappling. So that's kind of what I think those 3 have done so far for me, because I base myself more as a grappler, even though I have a lot of striking experience, but my forte is more on the ground. And but it's good to know, like, okay, my striking works here, my grappling works here, and that's what I like too, is like, because you're gonna get different people, so I want to make sure that each one of my specialties works well, no matter what I have to adjust to.
Now, people in training, some people gravitate more to striking, more to grappling. You said you're kind of more maybe in the grappling realm. Why do you think that happened that way?
I think it's just because I've been training grappling for so long. I've been more consistent with it. Although lately I feel like I've been doing a lot more striking, but definitely my jiu-jitsu is the biggest part of my fight game for sure. So I feel like that's just where I tend to adapt more to my training, or to my game plan mostly. I mean, my striking is used to set up my grappling basically. So the striking's there, but it's used so I can get in.
Now, you said you started training pretty young, like 15, as far as MMA goes. I know you had some training before. I kind of watched some interviews you had talked about. But where did you find MMA? When was your first exposure to it?
My first exposure to it was around the time I started jiu-jitsu. It was one of those things it was just one of those things. I was just watching a class one day, and all the guys were, kicking and striking and, going to the ground. And with having Taekwondo experience, I thought the striking was really cool and all the sparring. The one thing that was just the adjustment was trying to get my parents to let me go to the class, because I was only 15, and being a girl, everyone worries probably a little more about the girls than they would let like a younger, like a guy go into classes. So, but, they let me, and I, picked up on it and just kind of fell in love with it as soon as I started one class with the MMA. So that was basically where it took off.
Now, as in jiu-jitsu, kind of like in your development, where do you think you kind of started to do things effectively? Maybe what was like the first position or, attacks that you felt like you were really starting to get good at?
So I would say, I feel like a lot of girls, and I'll even agree myself, I picked up more on arm bars. It's a very basic move. It can be found almost in any position. I still to this day love arm bars for as long as I've been training. It's one of my favorite moves. That's definitely where I started, but then as you get better and you get more, advanced, and you start to learn other things. So if we say the arm bar doesn't work out, then you can transition to something else. But that's just kind of where I started picking up on things. And, it took a long time for me to even pick up on jiu-jitsu. There's so much that goes into it, because it's not like in Taekwondo, we would have like set things, like a set pattern that you would have to practice. Whereas in jiu-jitsu, there's nothing set. You learn techniques, and they're each different every day. And you just kind of have to learn to like be able to put them all together and like make them work and flow in different patterns and different ways to adapt your jiu-jitsu when you're competing, or even just grappling it in class.
Now, how long was it from the time you started training to that maybe first thought where you might say, okay, I want to start fighting?
Took a while for the MMA, but when I started jiu-jitsu, it took me about a year till I wanted to actually start competing. And then once I got into competing, then once I started doing the MMA training and really doing more, like watching more fights and stuff, then that's when, you know, I was more interested in like fighting. Probably more so at 16, that's when I got really more into like, oh, this looks fun, like I could do this kind of thing. But, you know, obviously at that age, you can't do MMA. They had pancreation around the time I was starting training, and it kind of started, I don't know, for me, it felt like it was kind of going away, so I didn't get to see much of it, and there was really nowhere that allowed me to like do it at my age and at my weight at the time. So I didn't really get that exposure, which would have been cool because, you know, pancreation is basically kid MMA. There's just no striking to the head. That would have been great exposure. I wish I had a chance to do that, but, you know, you work with what you got. But yeah, so I would say with MMA, maybe 2 years into my training, and then jiu-jitsu was just like a year into it.
Now, were you watching fights before you started training in MMA or come after?
Actually, after. I wasn't too familiar with the sport. I think maybe if I went to like a restaurant and like the TV was on, there would be like some fights or something, but I was never fully involved watching fights until I started actually training, and people had to start telling me like what fights to watch and what fighters were good and all this and that. So yeah, it was never a thing for me to just like sit down, like even like before I started jiu-jitsu, it wasn't a thing for me to just sit and watch MMA. That wasn't a thing until I started training it. And then I was like, okay, this is, you know, I should, and that's where it's actually good to start watching it too, is when you're training, because then you pick up on details that other fighters have that you could probably use, and it gives you ideas of how to incorporate stuff into your game plan too.
That makes you pretty unique, because most people watch the fights before they take up the training, but you were the opposite.
I know. I kind of laugh at myself because, I mean, I have friends that have been watching MMA for years before they even started training, and I was just this weird oddball that obviously does things after the fact. So, yeah, it was definitely different for me to go from not watching it to watching it during my training.
And I know you said you thought it was it, but, you know, when you started and you're age now, but I'm trying to understand, where did you see something that made you think that would be interesting to train in?
So what got me interested in MMA, I guess, is when someone had mentioned, and I've said this in multiple interviews, but is when someone introduced me to the name Ronda Rousey. And that's what kind of inspired me. She was the biggest female fighter of the time. When female MMA was still evolving. I mean, it was evolving before her, but she kind of made it big and made it so women's MMA could get to the UFC. And I started watching her and watching her fights, and I was like, well, this is, you know, it's great that someone like her could be in the MMA making it big just like the guys can. And that was what inspired me to want to do MMA.
So were you a big fan of her, or was it more of a source of inspiration?
I actually was a big fan, but when I first started training, I didn't know who she was. Someone actually told me about her, and I ended up having to like go and Google her. I mean, this is like the beginning years of my training. I was like, who's Ronda Rousey? So I Googled her, and then I looked her up on YouTube, and after that, then I started following her fight career from like 2000, I forget when I started training, like 2013 up until her retirement. And, you know, that was just one of my biggest inspirations was her, because she had such a unique style from all the other girls. And I was just so inspired by that, because I was hoping to, once I did MMA, to bring something unique that some other girls don't have.
Yeah, and it seems like it's you know, I always tell people, like, when I interview female athletes, I have a friend who just kind of started a promotion. I think he's on his third one. And he can't keep girls signed. I mean, they're getting snatched up by all the promotions, you know? So it's kind of a good time.
Yeah.
For the female side of the sport is really coming on.
No, it's awesome. It's actually, I think there's more girls now than when I was even interested in it, which is great. And even like the card I'm fighting on now, it's like an all-female card. So that's even cooler. Like, girls get their own fight card. It's like almost like, you know, it's like Invicta. Invicta is an all-female card. That's pretty cool to have just an all-pros female event where, you know, none of the guys are there. Which, no, you know, no discredit to all the guys. The guys are still awesome, but, you know, girls got to shine at some point too.
Now, this promotion, Valkyrie, did you find them or did they approach you?
I actually had a matchmaker from another event. He works multiple organizations, and he had talked to me about it actually right before my last fight. Because he was like, "Oh, this is an all-female card. It would be really awesome to have you on it." So he brought it to my attention. I was like, "Oh yeah, that'd be so cool." And then to find out that it was going to be their first card was even cooler, because then that means I'm going to be like one of the originals from that card, you know. So so yeah, I didn't go finding it on my own. Someone, yeah, and that's usually the case. Someone usually tells me something, and then I go and they find me or whatever.
Now, your next fight, you're fighting Kiana Montenegro. What were your thoughts on this fight coming up?
I'm actually really excited about this fight. You know, I know she's going to be tough. She's probably going to be one of my tougher opponents, you know, no doubt about it. You know, I've heard her say she's a grappler, and that's awesome because I'm a grappler too. I would love to go to the ground and both be able to show our skills, you know, there. But, you know, it's just, you know, it's however the fight goes too. But I'm really excited about this one. It's going to be a great event, especially since we're fighting for the title. So I'm really looking forward to this one, most definitely.
Now, she has a few more fights than you, I think 7. What have you seen?
Yeah.
Have you watched much of her fights or anything?
I'm not too much. I mean, every once in a while, maybe I've come across it on YouTube. I'm not really one to focus solely on just the videos because obviously those are older fights. I know she's evolved a little more since then. But I have my game plan that I'm going in with, and you know, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I'm not going to say too much about it because that's just not who I am. I'm not going to disclose a lot of info on my opponent. I just don't feel like that's right. You know, I don't think she would do the same.
So you like kind of,
yeah,
sort of as how you're preparing, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, you know, we're probably both watching filming each other, and that's just the game. But you know, it all just comes down to executing my own game plan, which is all that matters to me.
Yeah, because you know, some people feel more comfortable like talking a lot, but as you go on in your career, you don't think that's something you would want to do.
No, it's just not in my nature to do it in general. You know, I have no beef with anybody. I don't see a reason to actually purposely start something unless I felt, you know, I mean, I'm not one to start anything. I have full respect to all my opponents that I've ever stepped in the cage with. You know, I've never had any issues with any of them. We've all, you know, been friends after the fact. So it's always been good between me and my opponents, and I'm hoping, you know, the same goes for this fight coming up. So that's just how I look at fights. I'm not one to start things. It's a waste of time for me.
Yeah, I mean, that was the attitude like in the 90s, you know, when it first kind of started, you know, and even into the early 2000s. But it seems like the promotions are putting pressure on athletes to do this kind of stuff. Don't you think?
Yeah, I guess it really depends. I mean, obviously bigger organizations, yeah. I don't know so much for the amateur ones. I mean, I've never felt pressured into doing it, and even if I was, I would just be like, no, I'm not gonna, you know, because why would I? What would be the reason except you just want to put on a show? And the only show that's gonna be put on is in the cage anyway. It's not like they're gonna let us fight, you know, right up in front of the, you know, weigh-in stage or whatever. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and it's starting fake beef with anybody is just kind of weird to me anyway. It's like, what do you have against them except that they're stepping into the cage with you? You know, I'm sure they're not, you know, your next door neighbor bugging you or anything, I would think, you know.
Yeah, we saw some of that with Colby Covington and Masvidal, you know.
Yeah.
That kind of got out of hand, I suppose. But, you know, there's a big women's fight coming up here tomorrow, I believe. I think one is tomorrow. It's usually on Fridays. with Stamp and Angela Lee. Have you been paying attention to that at all?
A little bit here and there. But I know I heard it's going to be a really good fight, so I'm hoping maybe I'll catch that tomorrow too. I actually have a friend, I think that's supposed to be fighting tomorrow or Saturday. I got to check that again. So I'm supposed to be watching him. But yeah, no, I try to keep up with the females as much as I can because I know there's a lot of good ones out there, and I've trained with a couple really awesome girls. So it's always good to, keep up with the female MMA training, especially me being a female. It's good to learn from them.
Do you have any thoughts on that fight? I mean, it is a pretty big fight between the two of them. Have you watched much of either one of them?
I'll be honest, no, I have not. But, that's where, my whole mistake is. I probably should be more involved with that. So that's definitely where I need to do more of my research. But, I expect a good fight either way. I feel like the girls are going to put on a good show no matter what. That's what I always look forward to anyway with any event.
Yeah, well, I mean, some fighters don't watch. I mean, it's not necessarily that it's right or wrong. It's just your approach is this way and this person approaches that way.
I just feel like just because of the guys that I train with, they're always watching, MMA fights, but that's because they have the time. I mean, I have a 3-year-old I'm watching cartoons with all day if I'm not training. So it's really hard for me to sit there and watch a MMA fight when Coco Melon's on in the background or something,
It's probably the right thing to do, though. It's just watch cartoons. You know what I mean?
I mean, with her, yeah, probably. She's never interested when we have UFC fight nights or anything. She would rather be watching her cartoons, which, I get it. She's 3. So got to make adjustments.
It's probably more rewarding to just do that anyway, to just watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, does she like to play around with you at all when you're doing,
So it's actually really funny. She has just recently, out of nowhere, she's probably, watched me shadow boxing or whatever, but she'll actually come up to me now and attack me. And she'll try to wrestle or whatever. She'll do her little fake punches. She doesn't actually punch me, but she'll put her hands up and she'll attack me. So it's already in her nature to want to do it. So I think that's really cool that she's just like my little mini me, always wanting to copy whatever mommy does.
Now, do you bring her to the gym?
Occasionally I do. It's a little hard because she's very needy, like any little toddler or baby is. So if she's not with me, she's usually hanging out with her dad or she's hanging out with my parents. So yeah, it's really hard, especially if I'm in camp. I can't really have that distraction. And I would love for her to be able to just sit there and let me train while she's with me at the gym. It's just I haven't brought her enough to allow that to happen. And I think after this camp, I might start bringing her more just so she gets more used to the gym atmosphere. Because she loves hanging out at the gym. She likes punching the bags and all that stuff. It's just when mommy is sparring, she gets upset because, mommy's getting punched. I have to step in. It's happened a couple of times where I'm sparring or rolling and I brought her with me and, I could be in a position that she's uncomfortable with and she runs right in the middle of us and has to break it up and make sure mommy's okay. And then everyone else just thinks it's funny, but I'm over here I need to be training, kid. You need to go sit down. But it's fun either way, just knowing that she's at least watching.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the gym that you're training in. Who are some of the people that train you?
So I train at Excel Jiu-Jitsu in Oceanside. My head coaches are Michio Grubbs, the owner and founder of Excel, his wife, Kid Grubbs, and then they teach Jiu-Jitsu. My MMA coaches are Javon Coleman. He is also a professional MMA fighter. I also have Jamar Coleman. He's my big brother, but is also probably one of the ones more hard on me. And then also, aside from them, my dad, who does all my strength and conditioning, and is also a big part of my fight career.
Oh, wow. So your father's like heavily involved in your training?
He is very heavily involved. He doesn't teach. He doesn't teach my me how to do the techniques or anything, but he knows about it, and so he's always yelling at me. Well, not yelling at me, but he's always telling me to remind me, like, hey, you need to be doing this because your coach said this. But outside of Excel, he's my strength and conditioning coach. So he's the one, getting me fight ready, making sure I'm well conditioned, my cardio's up to date. He also makes sure my nutrition's on point. So he's very, very involved with the whole fight game. And he loves it. He's at all my fights. He's actually one of my cornermen. So he's always sitting there next to my MMA coach yelling because out of everyone in the room, whether it's the crowd or my coaches, I can always hear him no matter what. And that's good because sometimes it's hard to hear your coaches.
Now, was he kind of
especially when you're...
Was he an athlete when he was younger or something?
So when he was younger, he played soccer as a kid, all the way through high school, and he wrestled for a season. After that, he was in the military. He was in the Army. He was an Army Ranger. So I have that mentality of it's kind of just stay tough kind of a thing, just from that. And then he also was a bodybuilder when he was younger before he had kids. So that he's always been always athletic. So he's just passing it on. And then once I got really involved with training, then he started watching me and, keeping up with what I'm doing so that he knows how to train me accordingly so I can do well with my other training.
So he had a lot of foundation for doing strength and conditioning. He started developing workouts for you?
Yeah, it's been a very long process of what's already worked before, or what was working and what wasn't working. We started strength training when I was a teenager, not as heavily as we are now. And it was a long process because before we were starting with a lot of bodybuilding workouts, and then he realized, well, that's not really working because bodybuilding, if a lot of people know, it's more just about how your physique looks. There's really nothing else about it. I mean, yeah, you're strong, but it's all muscle looks. That's all it is. Whereas I need muscle that's functional and something that's going to keep me going in the fight all the time. So over time, he's already figured out how to make it work so that the workout I'm doing will help condition me for fighting. So every workout we do, that's all it's based off of.
In your experience, as you're doing this training for, your conditioning and stuff, do you feel like you're trying to develop more speed or more power? Or, I don't know, take me behind.
So, that's a very, it's broad, but right. I feel like just overall, faster, stronger, especially now going down in fight class, I want to be faster, but I still want to be able to keep the power that I've already had. But in order to, but with weight classes with the weight class I'm going down to, I already know I'm going to be lighter. So it's important for me to be a lot faster and quicker, and still being able to have that power that I had in the weight class I was fighting in before, because that's important. That's what's important too.
So you're doing more explosive stuff or sprints or?
Kind of a mixture of everything. So a lot of explosiveness, a lot of cardio. Strength training, we do focus on certain, forms or certain exercises that just get the muscles working, so that way I'm strong in certain points, which helps with the strength part. And then the cardio stuff's a lot of it could be sled pushes or kettlebells or whatever. And then just the other cardio comes from sparring and stuff.
Now, when you're, I was going to ask, lost my train of thought for a second. Let's kind of talk about, you were saying some of the stuff maybe that you went through trial and error that didn't work as far as some of your conditioning. What was some of that, or just from your experience? Because I think those things are interesting. People always talk about what worked, but not many people talk about anything that didn't work,
So, and yeah, everyone's different. So over time, I've always been told, and a lot of fighters run, I've always been that person. I will even admit to this day, I hate running. You will not see me out on the street or, running 10 miles or whatever. For me, it's always hurt my, my shins or my leg, my knees, and everyone's like, oh, well, you just need to build up the tolerance. It's like, no, I just can't run. Now, I will do sprints because sprints, it's a short distance, and, it's just about how fast you can go, not how long you can go. So that's what I do, for short cardio endurance. And then for long stuff, I actually like doing the rowing machine, which a lot of people don't realize, and I was just even recently finding out that burns a lot of calories. So you're still working, and it's also a full body, cardio. You're using your back and your arms, you're using your legs to push off. And I've always used it as accessories to my workout or something, but never just to my actual cardio routine. And so now that I've been incorporating that, I actually feel like my cardio's actually still pretty good without doing the running portion, which, a lot of people are going to disagree with me, and that's totally fine, but that's just what works for me.
Now, how many sessions a day? Do you do just one session, or how much do you feel is right for you?
It really depends on the day. I try to get in at least two, when I mean two, I usually have my workout in the morning with my dad, and then by the evening I'm training at Excel. And at Excel I'll probably be doing somewhere between 2 and 3 classes. It just depends on the day, but mostly 2. And then with my dad it's the one workout, but our workout could be 2 hours.
Just doing kind of like a class. It's not necessarily maybe just specific training for you, or is there some of that on?
When I'm in camp, it is specific training, but when I'm not, then it's just a class. But it's still all drilling, sparring, rolling, it's all that. It's just, set time. There's obviously it's set so people are there. But in camp, I'll probably, I'll maybe go with my coach and we'll do private, training or whatever. But most of the time I try to have people there that I can work with. So I have different bodies,
Now, talk to me a little bit about Valkyrie. I know you said it's an all-female card, but where is this promotion? Is it based out of California where you're at, or?
So it's in California. It's based out actually here in San Diego. I don't know too much about it because it is still really new, but I know that it's going to be, it's going to be one of the better amateur cards, even as for female. Well, actually, Valkyrie does, as they listed, amateur and pro events. So this one that they are doing is amateur, and then I'm sure at some point they're going to have a pro event, which, would be really cool to see. They're hosting it at the Legacy Super Center here in San Diego, which is, I was viewing the event. It looked really nice. So yeah, I'm excited to see what they put on for this whole show.
Do you know who's running it or who's putting it on?
I do. The name is, I'm drawing a blank to. I do know the matchmaker, but I forgot the name of the owner. So the matchmaker is Harvey Cass, and he's actually done matchmaking for Epic Fighting. For those who follow me, have seen me fight at Epic, and he's great. He's really good at matching up fights. So shout out to Harvey if you're watching this. But yeah, I'll have to go back and look at the name. I actually feel bad now that I don't know.
But it's people that were already involved in MMA then, most likely.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Usually that's the case. Even if you've never trained, you're at least involved in MMA somehow. That's usually how these events work. It's not like somebody was just bored one day and was like, oh, I should just run an MMA event. It's no, they've been involved with the sport at some point or another, whether they fought or not. They could have just trained, or they've just been really heavily involved watching it and already know how to run the events, and then they just decided to put on the whole thing.
Yeah, it's interesting that he's starting a female-only event because, to my knowledge, Invicta's not a woman unless I'm wrong.
Invicta is definitely an all-female card. It's an all-pro event, yeah. But I've never seen anyone with an all-female amateur event, which this is definitely the first one I've ever heard of.
Yeah, I'm always curious about who's doing them, just what their maybe what their background is or whatever.
Yeah.
Now let's maybe talk. I know you don't watch a lot of fights, but are there any like competitors that you maybe do watch some of that you're interested in watching?
Nothing too specific, except for like Amanda Nunes was actually one of my favorites. I mean, I was a Ronda fan hardcore for a long time, but after a while, after she beat Ronda that one time, I was kind of started following her, and I actually like her style. She almost kind of reminds me of the way I would base mine almost a little bit, because she's very well rounded in the stand-up game, so she has really good striking, and then she's also she's a grappler. I mean, I haven't seen too much of her grappling in some of her most recent fights, but I do know she can, so that's another fighter I like to watch. Male fights, there's a couple new ones actually. Like one of them is Paddy the Baddy. You guys, I'm sure a few people have heard of him. Mm-hmm. I was more interested when I first heard of his name. I was like, that kind of just caught my attention. Like Paddy the Baddy, you know. So then when I saw his fight recently, and I just like his character. It's just, I mean, I could never be like the way he is, but I just think he brings this different character to MMA that, I mean, we've probably seen, like with McGregor and everything. His is just a little different. It's his own little taste to the MMA world, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think he's more of a grappler than McGregor, too, so he's a little bit different in his style, He used to always wear...
McGregor is, yeah.
I don't know if you ever...
Yeah, McGregor's more of a wrestler. Oh, go on, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I don't know if you ever watched Kazushi Sakuraba fight in Pride. He was a very famous fighter in Japan. And he had, like, these orange shorts that said ICG. That was this, I think his sponsor is gym. And Patty used to wear those, too. So I think that... I
saw him with a picture of those recently. Yeah. So, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. But, yeah, no, he's definitely the character, and I'll probably be keeping up with him and even his teammate, oh, my gosh, I forgot the girl's name. Not Michelle.
Molly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Molly, yeah. Because I saw her knockout last week, and that was a really good knockout. I was actually really surprised by that one.
Now, as we're kind of winding down the interview a little bit. No, well, actually, I do want to ask you about, since you mentioned Nunes, what did you think about Nunes and Pena?
I was a little bummed because I was really expecting a lot from Nunes. I kind of underestimated Pena's strength in that whole fight. But that's where I feel like I said, Nunes has great striking, I think, but I think Pena's is more technical. Whereas she's able to pick her points and she's able to really get in those small spots. Whereas Nunes is more open with her striking, and so she exposes a lot of herself. Which, it works for some people. It just really depends on how skilled the other person is with their striking. That's where I feel like a lot of open guards and stuff don't really work. Even myself, I try to keep it more closed as like a boxer, opposed to like Muay Thai where they're more open. Boxing is a little more closed. So I was bummed, but then I became a fan of Pena, so now I follow her too. And I actually follow her because she's a mom like I am. I mean, so is Nunes. They're both moms, and that's what I like about those fighters, because they're moms, but they're still fighting. They haven't given up on anything because of their whole new lifestyle.
So it's real important. That is something interesting. Like, so how has it, like, before you started, now your mom, how do you feel it's changed you as far as being a competitor goes, or how do you think it's changed them?
So I don't know, and maybe this is different for a lot of moms who fight. I just feel like once, I was already aggressive with my training and everything before, but as a mom now, I feel like there's this like mom bear mode kind of, where you just get a little more aggression and more of a fighter's instinct kind of, because now you've got something worth fighting for, versus before where I was just kind of like, on my own, kind of doing my own training. Whereas now I have a reason to inspire somebody, and, along the ways if she decides to fight, she can see that, mommy's over here kicking butt, and that, you know, one day she could do that too. So that's, you know, kind of what inspires me more now with my MMA too, is I don't want her to, you know, I didn't want her to see mommy not training because, you know, she's a mom now. Mommy's still mommy, but she's also a fighter too. And I think that's what I wanted a lot from my outlook on being a mom and a fighter. And that's what I kind of see from like Nunes and Pena and all the other females in MMA. And I think that's really cool. You know, they got this mama bears, you know, mentality, and that's really awesome to see.
So it's almost an advantage, maybe the way you're saying, because you said it brings out more aggression.
Honestly, I do think it is an advantage, kind of, because, you know, you don't want to go home hurt. You know, you want your kids to see you at your best. So now you got this full aggression, you know, almost like a kill mode, basically. Which, I mean, I've had, but it's different being a mom. Like, before it wasn't like that. Now it's just like, I got to go home. I got to go take care of my kid. I can't get hurt. I got to hurt this person.
Plus, you're less likely to be spending time doing other things, too, that maybe are detrimental.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realize that, like, when you're saying you feel more aggression, it's kind of interesting to hear.
Yeah.
So in a way, it took you to another level, sort of, as a fighter in that way.
It kind of did, and even my mom had pointed out too. She was like, "You're on such a different level now, being a mom versus before," and she is kind of right at that point, because I feel like my training now is more serious than it was before. I mean, it was serious, but this is a different level of seriousness. And it's more of an inspirational seriousness. Like, if, you know, I could do it, anybody can do it. There's no excuses. You have to go and do it.
Now, as we're kind of winding the interview down, I always like to let maybe the person leave with something that they feel is important, or maybe something we discussed, or anything like that.
I guess just, like, you know, just don't let anything, I guess, get in the way of what your goals are. Whether it's, and then it could be from fighting, it could be something else in life that you're doing. But the biggest thing is, don't let anyone or anything tell you that you can't do something. I've had people tell me before I was even pregnant that, you know, once you become a mom or once you settle down, that, you know, your whole fighting career is over. You know, I've had people tell me this, and in the back of my mind, I'm like, you know, that's maybe your mentality. That's never been mine. I've always been told, you know, you can always do something as long as you have the right mindset. And that's what I wanted to prove after I had my daughter. Was I wanted to prove to basically the haters, if you want to call them, is, you know, I'm still doing what I love, but I'm also still a mom, you know, and anything's possible as long as you have that right mindset. Like, you know, it's anything is possible.
Now, for people that want to, maybe don't know you, that want to follow what you're doing, you know, obviously they can find you here on Instagram, but do you want to kind of tell?
I'm mostly active on Instagram. I mean, you can find me on Facebook too. Just type in my name. I'm hoping to expand my social media a little bit more. But yeah, if you want to keep up with my fighting career, you just follow me on my Instagram at ironbutterfly_MMA. You'll definitely be able to keep up with all my updated fight events, you know, jiu-jitsu, MMA, maybe catch a glimpse of my mom life, you know, just what, you know, I'm always active on Instagram for sure.
And maybe tell them one last time when your fight is now that it got rescheduled.
So if you haven't heard or you've already seen prior to yesterday's post, I was supposed to fight May 7th. Date got changed to June 25th. So if you are still interested in watching or coming to my event, it is now June 25th. Same location, same event, just different day.
Do you know if it's going to air anywhere or stream anywhere?
It will be, and I will be sure to post the link at some point this week. And then you can either purchase, I think you can purchase it ahead of time. I will have to check, but I will definitely have the link posted. I'll just keep reposting every so often so people can see it. If you want to buy tickets, though, I do have the link already in my bio, or you can either go to Valkyrie FC's page, and they'll have the link there too.
All right, Laurynn. Well, you know, again, I want to thank you for taking time to do this. I couldn't do this stuff without people like you that were willing to do it. And yeah, I'd love to have you on again sometime, you know, in the future, maybe after your fight or something, if you'd like to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm so down.
All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. It's great meeting you. It was great talking to you first time. And I just wish you good luck in your fight in June.
Thank you.
All right. Well, take care. It's great talking with you.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you for having me.